Thank you for joining me on my second Silverrudder video. Silverrudder is a solo sailing event around the island Fynen in Denmark. Again, I have been participating in my little Farr 727. This year we was 3 Farr 727. The boats were Itsy Kiwi and Medusa. Last year, which was my first Silverrudder, was mostly light conditions. This year the weather was more unstable. I must say I was a little bit nervous before the start. It is not an easy task to go around the island Fynen in a Farr 727 in nothing but easy conditions. I completely messed up the start. I did catch the 6-minute warning signal, but I didn't get my race timer started. It took me by surprise when the start went off, and I was pretty far away from the start line. Therefore I started the race in the back of the fleet. On the first part of the race I managed to catch up on some of the boats. I'm impressed by my boat. It is from 1977 and it is still doing quite well compared to the new designs. My boat is Bruce Farr's first design. He has made some very famous designs like Farr 40 and so on. We have now a Danish Facebook group with 8 boats connected. This is the actual reason why I participated last year. After last year, I thought that I could do better, so I have made some add-ons to my boat, and I can honestly say there is still room for a lot of improvement. On the first downwind leg, I went from 24th place to 15th place. In Silverrudder, the smallest boat starts first. 30 minutes after, the next size of boats will start. The fastest will start last. When sailing in a small boat, larger boats will catch you from behind. Up to the bridge, it went actually very well, but after the bridge I had to turn more against the wind, but I was as close as I could with my reaching Spinnaker. I decided to replace my Spinnaker with my Code Zero, but the wind was too strong for a Code Zero, and it took me a long time to get my Code Zero back on deck. When I was struggling with my Code Zero, I was only sailing with my mainsail. The gains I made on the downwind, I lost when I was struggling with my Code Zero. I was not aware that my camera has stopped recording, so I didn't film my struggle with the Code Zero. I got my video back when I was back in control. It is very easy to see where it all went wrong. I went from number 16 to number 25. After we have reached the top of Fynen, the beating against Æbleø began. The forecast said during the evening or night the wind would turn south. Most other boats turned south after Æbleø, but I decided to continue west as much as possible. I was hoping to go straight to Lillebælt, but I had to do some tags south. It was not a disaster what I did, but you can call it a moderate success. When we reached the top of Fynen, we began beating against Æbelø. I had some waves and the Code Zero was flushed overboard and was dragging along the side of the boat. It is not easy working conditions on a Farr 727 when beating in waves. I was able to get through the railroad bridge and was at the last corner when the wind disappeared. I knew at 3 a.m. the current was beginning to go against me. It took me 6 hours to really get going again. Sometimes I was sailing with a little bit of wind, and when the wind disappeared, I drifted back again. In Danish you call it Sisyphus work. You can say I was the first boat that didn't get through. The fascinating thing about Silverrudder is the complexity of the race. You cannot just buy the fastest boat. You will get beaten by boats that on paper are slower than yours, and you can beat boats that on paper are faster than you. Small things have really big consequences. The two other Farr 727 I did not see much of. They disappeared in the horizon before me. But there is a next year. And I did complete